James chapter 5, verse 7 to 12. Be patient then, brothers, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valuable crop, and how patient he is for the autumn and spring rains. You too, be patient and stand firm, because the Lord's coming is near. Don't grumble against each other, brothers, or you will be judged. The judge is standing at the door. Brothers, as an example of patience in the face of suffering, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. As you know, we consider blessed those who have persevered. You have heard of Job's perseverance and have seen what the Lord finally brought about. The Lord is full of compassion and mercy. Above all, my brothers, do not swear, not by heaven or by earth or by anything else. Let your yes be yes and your no be no, or you will be condemned. Let's invite Reverend Ernest to give his sermon today.
Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Ernest, if I haven't met you, and I'm married to Carmen. Carmen and I, we've been married for about 7 years now, almost 7 years, and I still remember it like it was yesterday. It was in the middle of January, so we expected it to be a very, very hot day, but it turned out to be a rainy day. It was a big wedding in Parramatta. We had 300, 400 people at the wedding. So everyone was there, our family, our friends, our relatives, church friends, high school friends. And the wedding started, it was at 11 o'clock. I got there early. I was chatting to people, catching up with friends I hadn't seen for a while, taking photos and, all that sort of stuff. And before you know it, everything was ready. It was time to start. But there was just one problem. The bride hadn't arrived yet. And we were waiting and looking at our clocks like, where is she? We waited 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. She still wasn't here. I was starting to get a bit nervous, maybe she's got cold feet. See, 30 minutes in, on our run sheet, 30 minutes was when we were meant to be saying our vows. That's when we were meant to be exchanging rings or that. And she wasn't here. So getting a bit nervous and it felt like ages. It was only 30 minutes, but it felt like, it was ages. I was standing in front of the church, everyone's watching me. I'm trying to smile and my mouth is getting tired and getting nervous. And finally, she turns up 40 minutes late. 40 minutes late. Now, I couldn't ask her there and then why she was late, but later on, I asked her, look, were you late because of the traffic? She said, oh, yeah, that was part of it. I said, were you late because of the rain? Slower driving speed. She goes, oh, yeah, that was part of it. And then she explained, it was because she didn't want to pay the $2.50 toll on the M4. It had a toll back then. And so because she wanted to save $2.50, we all had to wait 40 minutes for her. Now, there are many situations in life where we find ourselves waiting for someone or something. Perhaps you're at the train, waiting for a train, or maybe you're queuing up at the supermarket. Perhaps you're waiting for your HSC results. So we all know what it means to wait, don't we? And as Christians, we are people who wait. We are waiting for the day when Jesus comes back. We're waiting for the day when he comes to fix all the problems in this world, to right all the wrongs, to wipe out injustice, to destroy all evil and death. That is what we're waiting for as Christians. Now, most of the time when we talk about waiting is a very passive thing. You don't do anything when you're waiting. You might listen to music or you might play games on your phone or something, but generally you're not doing much. And any activity that you are doing is not really related to what you're waiting for. It's just a way to pass time. Now, when the Bible talks about waiting, though, and particularly talking about waiting for Jesus' return, it uses a very different kind of language. Waiting becomes a very active kind of thing. And the activity that we do while we are waiting is actually something that comes out of the fact that Jesus is coming back. And in today's passage, we're going to look at what it means for us to wait as Christians. So firstly, if you keep your Bibles open there or follow along on the screen, firstly, James tells us that we are to wait patiently like a farmer. So have a look, chapter 5, verse 7. This is what it says. Be patient then, brothers, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valuable crop, and how patient he is for the autumn and spring rains. You too be patient and stand firm, because the Lord's coming is near. Now, I know there are a number of you here who have got a bit of a green thumb, who like to grow things in your backyard. And those of you who like to grow things, you know the value and the importance of patience, whether it's growing crops or growing flowers or vegetables or growing trees. They all require a level of patience. I remember in high school, I think it was, in science class, we learned how plants grow. Remember you get a little bean, you put it in a petri dish with some cotton wool and you wet it. Right? You all remember? I think it was high school, maybe primary school. I can't remember now. But and I remember taking a little petri dish home and putting it on the windowsill and wanting to watch it grow. And it was so slow. It just sits there, and I'm looking at it day after day after day after day, and nothing is happening. I think after maybe a week, it's a little thing started to poke its head out. And I wanted to hurry it up. I wanted to see the thing come up. And I tried watering it and putting it in the sun, and I think I ended up drowning it. So I'm no good at gardening because I have no patience. I want things to happen straight away. I want to come back the next day and see a full-grown plant. But as we all know, growing things, you can't hurry it along. It doesn't work like that. You need to wait. But being patient, though, while you're waiting, doesn't mean you just sit back and you do nothing. But the farmer's job doesn't end with just planting the seed in the ground. But that's not the end of it. He has to water it. He has to fertilize it. He has to protect it from bugs and pests. He has to pay attention to the changing weather patterns. And it's a very active kind of patience. It's a very active kind of waiting. He's doing things while he's waiting for the plant to grow. And it's also a kind of patience that he needs to continue over a long period of time. It's not something he does once or twice, but he has to keep on doing it. Now, Thomas here, where's Thomas? Somewhere at the back there. Thomas, most of you know, his dad has a number of trees in his backyard, a number of trees that he's planted in the last couple of years. They're fruit trees. I can't remember what fruit trees he's got now. I think he's got like a mandarin tree and I think an apple tree. I can't remember exactly. But he's got a few fruit trees which are still in the infancy. Right now they're just sticks with a few leaves on it. That's all there is, right? And it'll be quite a few years before they're big enough to kind of be more mature, and it'll be a few years after that before they even start to bear fruit. But see, Thomas's dad knows that if he is patient with it, if he keeps nurturing this plant, if he keeps tending these trees day after day, year after year, one day he's going to be able to enjoy a fresh mandarin or a fresh apple from his backyard. See, that's what it means to be patient, that you have to wait while actively waiting, while looking after the plant, and one day you're going to be able to enjoy the fruit of your patience. Now, you might be wondering, though, what does it mean for us then as Christians to wait for Jesus' return? I mean, what does it mean that we are like a farmer or a gardener? What kind of active waiting do we do? Well, have a look again at verse 8. This is what it says. It says, "You too, like the farmer, be patient and stand firm." Or literally, it's saying, strengthen your hearts. Right? Be patient and strengthen your hearts because the Lord's coming is near. Well, you know what it's like when you've been waiting for something and you've been waiting for a long time. You're like, come on, hurry up. You get impatient. This is what I'm like at the traffic lights. Hurry up. How much longer is this going to take? And then you generally do one of two things. Either one, you start to think, look, is this really going to happen? Is Jesus really coming back? Or maybe he's not. Maybe none of this is really true. And you start to doubt, and your impatience starts to shift and become doubt. And your doubt starts to shift and slide into becoming unbelief. And that's why James tells us we need to be patient and stand firm. Strengthen your heart. Or put some muscles on it. Right? So look at what God promises in the Scriptures. Right? Come to God with your impatience, with your doubts, and wrestle with it. Right? Work at it. Remind yourself of the gospel of Jesus. See, strengthening your heart, standing firm, is not something that you do once and that's it. It's something that you've got to keep on doing. You need to keep on strengthening your heart. You need to work at it so much that it's like you fix it into place so that it won't ever move. So that's one thing that you could do while you're being impatient. But the other thing that could happen, though, when you're being impatient, though, is that you take your frustrations out on other people. You're waiting, you're like, oh, come on, why can't I hurry up? It's all your fault. Right? And that's what, in the next verse 9, this is what James says. It says, don't grumble against each other, brothers, or you will be judged. The judge is standing at the door. Now, if you were here 2 weeks ago, as we've been going through this letter of James, you remember that James is writing to a church, to a people in the church who were fighting and quarreling, who were going to war, basically, with their words. And James is telling them, look, you wouldn't be doing that. You wouldn't be fighting and quarreling if you remember that Jesus is coming back soon. And yes, sometimes it feels like it's a long, long way away. But it's actually really soon. He said it's very near. It's so soon that James says it's like he's standing at the door already. He's about to come in. He's nearly here. So hang in there. But be patient. Stand firm. Strengthen your hearts. Don't grumble against each other. Be patient. This is what it means for us as Christians to be patient, to wait. It's to be like the farmer. Now, secondly, there's a second way in which we are to wait. And he says that we are to wait patiently like the prophets. Have a look in verse 10. He says, brothers, as an example of patience in the face of suffering, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. Now, in the Old Testament, if you're familiar with the Old Testament, God sent many prophets to his people Israel to be his messengers. He sent people like Moses and Samuel and Elijah and Isaiah and Jeremiah and Jonah and many other kind of prophets like that. Now, they were all spread out throughout different periods of Israel's history. They were around for different lengths of time. They all had different kind of characteristics, different emphasis in their message. But the one thing that they all had in common was that they all suffered for God. They all suffered as a prophet. Now, a few months ago, we were looking at the book of Ezekiel, and we saw how Ezekiel in his life, how he suffered for God. He suffered humiliation. He had to perform these strange mimes in conveying God's message. He even lost his wife because he was a prophet. And for Ezekiel, being a prophet meant that he had to wait patiently. It meant that he had to endure the pain and the suffering as God's messenger. Now, when I was in high school, I went to an all-boys high school. And so when you get a whole bunch of boys together, there's just something that happens, right? They kind of do silly things. And I've seen it here at this church as well, right? Because it's all boys, right? We want to appear tough in front of each other, right? We want to be men, right? So we do these silly things where we prove our toughness to each other. And so we do things like we punch each other. We go, come on, punch me as hard as you can, right? And we just go, and we hit each other, right? And we go, and we pretend it doesn't hurt. We're like, no, do it again. No, it's all right. And we do things like, Chinese burns, where you grab the arm and you twist it in the opposite direction and you try and make them hurt, And you're like, oh, no, it doesn't hurt. And you do this thing where you hold out your fist, right? And then they hit your knuckles like this as hard as they can, right? They smack you and you just got to bear it and you go, no, it doesn't hurt. Do it again. Right? And we're just we're immature, idiots, but we were trying to be tough, right? We're trying to be men. But see, that was how the prophets waited. They endured the pain, the suffering. They endured it. They grit their teeth and they carried on. See, another example of this kind of patient endurance that the Bible gives us is Job. Have a look in verse 11. It says, as you know, we consider blessed those who have persevered. You have heard of Job's perseverance and have seen what the Lord finally brought about. The Lord is full of compassion and mercy. Now, if you are not familiar with the story of Job, Job was a man in the Bible who, his story was all about suffering. See, on one day, his ox and his camels were stolen. A natural disaster killed his sheep. His sons and daughters were all killed in an accident. He developed a painful skin disease. And even his wife despised and scorned him. Right? So in the space of a day, he lost his wealth, his family, and his health. And yet, James says that this is the Lord's compassion and mercy. Now, they're not the kind of words I would normally think of when reading the story of Job, that God is compassionate and mercy. And yet, if we were to read on in the story of Job, by the end of the story, we understand why. Because see, in the last chapter of the book, this is what Job says to God. He says, my ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. See, Job, through his suffering, he had gained a new understanding of who God is. So he didn't just know God in here anymore, but now he knew God deep in here. He knew God personally and intimately. Now, when we started this series on the book of James a number of weeks ago, I shared with you briefly what life was like, a number of years that I went through after high school. After high school, I didn't go to university like most Chinese people do. My parents went back to Hong Kong, where we were from, and they went back to live there for various reasons. And so I was here by myself. I was living with a bunch of friends. We shared a house. So I had to pay my own bills. I had to pay my own rent. I had to buy my own groceries. And had very little money to spare. I remember at one time, all the money I had in the bank was $20. $20 when you've got to pay rent and food and bill and phone, right, doesn't go very far. $20 in the bank. So at the time, to pay for all this stuff, I had a full-time job. I didn't go to uni. I worked full-time. I was working in a takeaway shop, right? Not very prestigious, not the kind of thing that an Asian kid grows up wanting to work in. But I was working in a takeaway shop in the food court, and I did that for 3 years. 3 years, it was hard work. I worked for at least 12 hours a day, sometimes longer, waking up at 5 a.m. in the morning, going to work. And I did that for 3 years. And at the end of the 3 years, for one reason or another, the shop that I was working for, they had to close. The shop had to close down. And so I had no job. Right? I was still working there. It was the last week working at this shop. I think they were going to close on, I think it was a Wednesday. I had no job. I had no qualifications. I had no time to even go for interviews and look for a job. So I was very stressed, very worried. I mean, I needed a job. I needed the money to pay bills. What was I going to do? So the shop was going to close on the Wednesday. On the Tuesday, I got a phone call out of the blue from someone that I didn't really know that well, but they offered me a job out of the blue, working in a bank. So here I am one day on the Tuesday, I'm wearing an apron and jeans, working at a takeaway shop. On the Wednesday, my last day, and on the Thursday, I'm wearing a suit and tie, working at a bank. Now, I've been in several situations like that, where things were desperate, where I didn't know what was going to happen, and yet somehow God had provided for me. Where money came in, or opportunities, or just things fell into place. And see, as a Christian, I had always known that God is in control, that God loves me, that God will provide for my needs. But see, going through those 3 years, going through the difficulty of not having much money, of not having job security, that taught me to trust God. And through that experience, I came to know God more personally, more intimately than I knew just intellectually beforehand. Now I knew God, I experienced God and how God provides. See, and that was what Job had discovered. See, through Job's experience, he didn't know why he was suffering. He didn't know why all these bad things were happening to him. And so he cried out to God. He complained. He wept. He pleaded. But through all that, he endured. He was struggling in his faith, yes, but he never lost sight of God. He did not allow his suffering to slide into unbelief. So James tells us this is how we are to wait patiently, by enduring suffering. And he's got one final warning for us in verse 12 there. Verse 12, he says, "Above all, my brothers, do not swear, not by heaven or by earth or by anything else. Let your yes be yes and your no, no, or you'll be condemned." Now, it's hard to know exactly why James has included this here. I think that James is taking something that Jesus taught back in Matthew chapter 5, and I think he's taking it and applying it particularly to the issue of suffering and patience. Because you see, when we are suffering, when we're faced with suffering, it is very tempting sometimes to say things like, to say to someone, look, if you help me out here, look, I swear I'll pay you back. Or look, if you help me, look, I swear I'll do whatever you want. Right? Because you see, in our desperation and in our impatience, we make these impulsive promises to people in order to try and convince them to help. And I think James is saying, don't let your impatience cause you to swear by heaven or by earth. But you should let your integrity of your character to allow people to trust you, to be willing to help you. Because you, as a person, is trustworthy. Not because you swear by heaven or by earth, but because you are a trustworthy person. And so don't swear by heaven or by earth, but let your yes be yes and your no be no. Now, what have we looked at this morning? Now, let me just recap quickly. We said, beginning that as Christians, we are waiting. We are waiting for the coming of our Lord Jesus, for the day when He will come to fix this world and to fix all the problems in this world. And we saw that there were two things that we need to be aware of as we are waiting, two ways in which we're to wait. Firstly, we are to wait like the farmer, to stand firm in our faith, to strengthen our hearts so that we don't give up and we don't grumble against one another. And secondly, we are to wait like Job and like the prophets who endured suffering, who trusted God in their suffering and not made impulsive promises. Now, what does that mean for us, though, in the 21st century? Because I think, in the 21st century, in the modern day, we have largely lost this idea of waiting and waiting patiently. And I can think of three reasons why we have lost this idea in the church. See, I think, firstly, we don't like to wait. We're a society that don't like to wait. We like fast food, we like high-speed internet, we like same-day delivery. And if something takes too long, if nothing's happening, if there are no results, then we move on. We give up, we move on, we try something else. But I think as Christians, given what James says here, I think as Christians we need to readjust the way we think about time, how long time is. Now, as you know, Christmas is coming very soon. You may have noticed shops starting to decorate with Christmas decorations, with Christmas trees and things like that. You may have noticed on TV that the advertisements coming up about sales and things you've got to buy, the latest cool things you need to have. So it's only 6.5 weeks till Christmas. Did you know that? Less than 46 days away and counting. And as we get closer and closer and closer to Christmas, kids get more and more and more excited. But if you're an adult, you get more and more and more stressed as you come closer to Christmas. Because you see, as a kid, right, you think, 46 days, well, that's so far away. It's ages. I can't wait. I'm counting down 46 days, 45 days to go, 40 days ago. No, you're counting down. You're excited. But it seems so far away. As an adult, you have the opposite response. You think, wow, it's Christmas already. I've gone by so fast the whole year. I only have 46 days left to go Christmas shopping. Only 46 days. And it seems like such a short period of time. So why are there such different responses between kids and adults when it comes to Christmas? Well, obviously because, kids, it's all about receiving for them with Christmas, and for adults, it's all about giving. But there's a second reason. I think it's because adults and kids have a different sense of time. See, I have a 2-year-old son, Jake. And Jake, as a 2-year-old, he doesn't really understand Christmas yet, which is good. Don't tell him, all right? But if he did know about Christmas, right, if he did understand what Christmas was, imagine it's the day after Christmas, right? And he's excited over the presents he received. And he asks, Daddy, when is it going to be Christmas again? I'll tell him, it's not going to be Christmas for another year. And he'd be like, a year? That's a long time for a 2-year-old. That's half his lifetime he's got to wait for to get to Christmas again. So it's a long time. 1 year is a long, long time for a 2-year-old. But for an adult, 1 year is relatively, compared to him, 1 year is a very short period of time, right? It's only 1/30th of my life, or for some of you, maybe 1/50th of your life. It's a relatively short period of time in comparison to what the child feels. Right? Because compared to my age, it's a very short period of time. Compared to his age, it's a very long period of time. And so we have a very different sense of what time is like, how long time is, depending on how old you are and what you're comparing it to. Now, I think as we wait for Jesus' return, we need to compare it in light of eternity. So even if we have to wait 50 years for Jesus to come back, 100 years, 1,000 years, 10,000 years, that might feel like a long time compared to our human lifespan. But 1,000 years, 10,000 years compared to eternity is a very, very short period of time. It's a very short period of time. And we don't have long to wait before Jesus comes back. That's why James says he's at the door. He's about to come. He's very, very near. See, it's like me on my wedding day waiting for Carmen at the church. That 40 minutes on the day felt like a long time, especially standing in front of everyone. It felt like a very long time. But compared to the 1 year that we've been engaged for, compared to the 3 years that we've been dating for, compared to the 10 years that we've known each other for, 40 minutes is not much, is it? So, and when you think about all the months that we had put into organising the wedding, organising the flowers, and the photographer, the music, the reception, everything is now ready. This is the day. Everything is ready. And Carmen arriving at the church is the very last thing that needs to happen. The very last thing that needs to be done. But all the big things, all the complicated, expensive things have been done. It's just this one last thing. And when we think about what God had to do to fix our relationship with Him, so He had to send His Son Jesus to be born, to live. He had to die on the cross. He had to rise again from the dead. He had to send His Holy Spirit. And Jesus coming back is just the last little thing that needs to happen before everything is finished. All the big things have already been done. All the difficult parts have been done. Him coming back, it's the last little bit. And so however long it takes, whether it's 50 years, 100 years, or 10,000 years, however long it takes, we need to wait. We need to wait patiently because it's not really that long. Now, the second reason I think we don't wait patiently is because often it seems too hard. We want things to be easy, don't we? We want shortcuts. We want the easy diets. We want machines that will make our jobs easier. And again, I think we need to readjust our perspective as Christians. See, Jake, as a 2-year-old, he's at this terrible tantrum age, which means his emotional range is very short. He's either on or off. Okay, he's either really happy or he's really angry, right? There's no in between. He's just too extreme. So it's either on or it's off. Okay, and so even there are times when he hurts himself, he bumps himself against a table or something, and it may not be a very hard bump, but because he's feeling a little bit of pain, he bursts out crying. He's fully bawling his eyes, right? Tears are coming down. He's red in the face, and suddenly he can just switch it off. You distract him with something. You wave a little toy or you turn the TV on. Suddenly, he's fine. Right? It just switches off. 1 minute he's crying his head off. Next minute, he's okay. He's laughing. See, now, I think we need to think of our pain and our suffering a little bit like that. See, I know there are people here who have gone through or are going through difficult times. See, but in light of the cross, in light of what Jesus has done for us, it is only a very small thing. It is only a very little pain. And we might cry out. We might be bawling our eyes out. And yes, it is painful. I'm not trying to downplay that things are difficult or hurtful. But in light of the cross, in light of what Jesus has done, it is very small, a very, very small kind of suffering. Yes, it is painful, but it's small. And when you think about what Jesus had to go through on the cross, the physical pain and the torture He went through, when you think about the friendships, the betrayal that He faced at the hands of His disciples and His friends. If you think about Him hanging there on the cross, not so much the physical pain, but the broken relationship between Him and God the Father, but that He took on Himself the broken relationship that we had, and He became separated from God the Father. And if you think about how much Jesus had endured for you, for your sake on the cross, then whatever suffering that you have to endure for His sake is very, very small in comparison. Now, the third and final reason why I think we're not good at waiting patiently, and perhaps this is the most disturbing reason, I think, is that I think we're not even looking forward to Jesus' return. So I think for many of us, life in Sydney is pretty good. Life in Sydney is pretty good. So many of us are not in any real suffering, nothing long term. Yes, there are ups and downs, but perhaps more ups than downs. And we are so busy with our lives. We're busy with our careers, with our studies, with our holidays, with our leisure, with our investments, with our families. We are so preoccupied with life on this earth that we don't have time to think about Jesus. We don't long for Jesus coming back. So if we were to talk about this in say, Africa or in India or to the underground church in China, there would be many, many people who would be eager to hear of Jesus' second coming. This would be one of the most important things they would talk about, I think. But here in Sydney, I think it barely registers a thought. Because life in Sydney, life here in the here and now is so comfortable. Life here seems so good. It seems so much better even compared to what is to come. I remember when Cam was pregnant with Jake. It's 9 months of pregnancy, 9 months of suffering, really, for the woman at least. And I remember waiting for the day when he would be born. We knew roughly, what time it would be around September. We knew the rough date. And we were just waiting and waiting for something to happen. You know? And finally, one night, in the middle of the night, she woke up at 3:30 in the morning. She said, "Oh, feeling uncomfortable, feeling, I think something's happening." So we called the hospital, went to the hospital, and we were there at the hospital for 30 hours. Right? We were there waiting for the water to break. We were there waiting for the contractions to start. We were there waiting for the cervix to dilate and all that sort of stuff. Right? 30 hours we were at the hospital, and it was painful. It was easy for me, right? But it was painful for my wife. So she was there 30 hours aching and groaning and just wanting it to be over. And so that's why the hospital, they've got all these things to help you. They give you this happy gas that you can sniff, which kind of, I wanted to have a try of it, but they wouldn't let me. They've got this gas thing, and then they give you morphine, they give you drugs, and they give you epidural, all this stuff to kind of relieve the pain, because it is very painful and it takes a long time. And I said to someone, why is the human pregnancy so long? Why 9 months? Why couldn't it be like a mouse? A mouse, it's all over and done in 21 days, right? Easy. 21 days, 3 weeks later, you've got a new baby. But then someone else said, well, just be glad it's not like the elephant. The elephant is pregnant for almost 2 years. And just think of the size of the thing that's got to come out, right? It's huge. So it's long, it's painful. And I mean, who would want to go through pregnancy? Seriously, if you think about it, who would be crazy enough to volunteer and say, yes, I will put myself through 9 months of pain. I'll kind of, get this watermelon out of my belly. Who would go through that? That is crazy. And yet you talk to every mother and they would tell you that yes, it took a long time. Yes, it was lots and lots of pain. But they'll also tell you that it was absolutely worth it. That it was absolutely worth it. And they will do it again and again, actually. Some of them have more than one kid. So whether you got baptized today or whether you've been a Christian for many, many years, let me tell you, it will be worth it. It will be worth the wait. See, what God has promised us in Jesus, what God has promised will happen when Jesus comes back, is going to be far better than anything that this world has to offer. And yes, you might have to wait a little while, or you may not, we don't know. You may have to wait a while before He comes. You might have to endure some suffering in the meantime. But if you compare it to eternity, if you compare it to Jesus suffering on the cross, then it's only a very, very small price to pay. So let me encourage you, be patient. Be patient. Wait patiently, because it's going to be worth it.